Good afternoon, everyone. This is Brick from How to IELTS, and today we have a very special video, and that's because we have a special guest. We have the expert Glyn, who is also a fellow YouTuber. Before I begin, I will let Glyn introduce himself. So, Glyn, could you please tell me who you are, tell the audience who you are, and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Nice to speak to you again, Brooke, and thanks for the invite. As you said, my name's Glyn. I work as an examiner for a few different English tests, not with IELTS, but, we all work with pretty much the same criteria. Also, I'm an English teacher. I've been teaching English since January 2009, so a long time. In that career, I've kind of done everything. I've been an academic director of a school. I've been a teacher trainer. The thing I really love doing at the moment is material design, so like making lessons for other teachers to use. But I like examining too, and as you say, I'm a YouTuber.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you for the introduction. And can you just tell me a bit about your YouTube channel?
Yeah, so the YouTube channel is called Expert Examiner IELTS. On this channel, I focus on IELTS speaking and IELTS writing. In short, I try to do 3 practice speaking tests per week, and I try to give like super detailed feedback, like an hour long. I also do about 3 or 4 writing checks per week. So basically, I invite candidates to send me their writing, and then I choose some of that writing, and the idea is to get people to kind of see how an examiner's brain works, because I think a lot of people think examiners are these like gods of English who like know everything and have this secret knowledge, and we don't. We are just people who are trained to evaluate writing and speaking. And so it gives people the chance to see like exactly what an examiner thinks, exactly why the examiner might give the marks that they would give. Now, of course, all examiners are a little bit different. We generally agree more or less on the marks, but it's just like an insight into my thought process when I'm scoring writing and speaking.
Okay, interesting. And for those of you wondering, I will leave Glyn's YouTube channel. I will leave the link to that in the description below. Now, for this video, I thought I would ask you a bunch of questions related to IELTS Writing Task 2. And the reason why I've picked this is, again, a lot of my viewers may have already seen our last video on my channel where we talked about speaking. And we had a lot of views for that video. So I thought it would be a good idea for us to have a similar sort of video, but this time with Writing Task 2. So the way I've structured this is, first, I thought I would ask you some general questions about Writing Task 2. For example, how many paragraphs should we write? What's a good amount of words to write? Things of that sort of nature. Then for the second part, I've got some really juicy questions where I've been given scenarios of, a candidate or a student stuck in a specific situation. For example, they're stuck at a band 6. How do they get a band 7? So I'd love to get your views on those questions. And then part 3, the final section, I've taken some questions from members of my WhatsApp group. So I would, would love for you to answer those. And for those of you wondering, if you would like to join my WhatsApp group, you can click the link in the description. You can also join Glyn's Telegram group. I'll leave the link for that too. But let's get started. Are you ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, excellent. So the first question is IELTS writing more about exam techniques or writing skills?
I think we might also want to add an option or English language proficiency. I think
Yeah.
whether it's speaking, reading, writing, listening, whatever it is, English language for writing, grammar, and vocab, that's always going to be the foundation of your writing. With writing part 1, there are certainly like conventions that are a little bit specific to IELTS, but for writing part 2, it's just an essay. And in my career of teaching English, like we do essay writing from B1 onwards. So if you've studied English, if you've used something like Cutting Edge or English File or one of those common course books where you have like a comprehensive thing of reading, writing, listening, speaking, grammar, vocab, pronunciation, you should have already done some essay writing. So a lot of those essay questions, they are universal, and probably most candidates have done some essay writing in their own language. So I think, yeah, task 1, you do need to learn a little bit about like what the IELTS guys want, but part 2, it's just a essay.
Okay. And here's another question. So I'm assuming somebody who doesn't know anything about IELTS, they've been asked to take the IELTS exam to go to university. So this question is, how can students prepare for IELTS writing?
The first thing I would say is you need to understand what your current level of English is, right? If your current level of English is you're a solid C1 and you need to get IELTS to move to the UK and the UK asks for 5.5, you probably need to do a week's preparation and then you're fine. If your English level is like a solid intermediate B1 and you need a score of 7, I would say don't think about IELTS at all yet. You are not ready for this. You have to get your English better. Now, if you're at that stage where, like, let's say you're a solid B2, you're around, high B2 and you need a score of 6.0, 6.5, so your English level is there, what I would do, and I really think students should be proactive, I would collect a bunch of people who have the same level as me, right? We live in 2025. We all have access to like Facebook groups where it's like IELTS preparation. I would spend a bit of time, find some people, find a group of people, and if you put a little bit of money together, you might be able to get a teacher. But even if you don't have a teacher, meet in that group once or twice a week. Zoom is free, 45 minutes conference thing. I think, I would have one person be like pretending to be the teacher each time, but I would definitely want to have a group dynamic where we could work together. I always think group learning is better. If you can do it with a teacher, great. You can get decent teachers, maybe even for $20 an hour. I understand. And, if there's a group of 10 of you, $20 per hour, it's not that much. But even if you don't have that money, meet in a group. There are loads of people out there that have the same problems as you, and pooling your ideas together is so much easier than trying to do it alone or asking some random guys on YouTube.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I know in my WhatsApp group, many people come together and they just start an audio call, and everyone joins in and they discuss ideas. They go back and forth. Sometimes I will join, so I will just kind of monitor and moderate the whole situation. If anyone asks a question that nobody knows, then I might answer. So that's the benefit of these groups. So yeah, if you are watching, you can join our groups, mine and Glyn's. We have our own groups, so feel free to join. Just talking about your YouTube channel, at the start you mentioned that you do lots of writing feedback videos, and that's something that you've inspired me as well, and you motivated me, in that regard as well. But I wanted to ask you: you've marked many writing task 2 essays, a lot of them on your YouTube channel. From your experience, what are the most common mistakes you've noticed that students make in IELTS writing?
So mistakes should go, I think it's important to categorize mistakes into mistakes where you need to learn to get better and mistakes where it's just like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. The critical mistakes, those mistakes where I think like, oh no, like not reading the question, not understanding what you need to do. Like if there's a question that asks you to talk about the reasons why something happens and to talk about the solutions, sometimes candidates just talk about the solutions or they just talk about the reasons why. Now that's just being inattentive. So just, reading the question is such an obvious thing. In terms of like a lack of skills, something that candidates get wrong over and over again, argumentation. Like we are from the UK, and so a lot of our education, we kind of learn not just from our education, but I think from our like culture and society. We discuss things, we have arguments, we tell people that we're wrong, we disagree with people. Like Arguments and putting forward positions have like very clear conventions, right? So you have, I'll talk a little bit quite long about this. Let's say you have like a motion in a debate, right? Like social media is good for you. Do you agree or disagree? That's what we call the position. If you agree, your position is you agree. Now, to support that position, we need arguments. Social media is good. Position agree. Arguments require a label, an explanation, and either evidence or an example. So a label would be social media is good because it helps you to keep in contact with your friends. Now I can explain that argument and say, um, if you leave your home country and go to live in another country, it can be very difficult to stay in touch with friends and family without social media. But if you have social media, you can write to them in real time, and you can also upload pictures, so all of your friends and family back home can see where you live, can see how you're living. And then maybe an example, for example, if moved to become an engineer in Australia, they might or even an example from your real life. But the point is that arguments have this structure, that they should have a clear and simple label. Then you should explain what the argument is and then back it up with an example. And for me, it's obvious that this is a critical problem with so many people, that they just don't have any idea about what actually an argument is. And sometimes you even speak to candidates and you ask them, well, what is an argument? And, they just have no idea.
Wow, that was a very detailed answer. I would have bought that information off you if I was mad at it. I would be willing to pay for information like that. So yeah, thank you very much for that. You actually went into a lot of great detail there. Just moving on, slightly talking about bands. So again, from your experience, what are the most common reasons that people get stuck at a band 6 for writing?
The That's tricky. I'd say probably the most common is just grammar and vocab. Um, in most cases, just like I think I said in the speaking, your IELTS score is generally a reflection of your English level. So if you're stuck at band 6, probably you don't know the grammar that a band 7 knows, or you can't use the vocab that a band 7 can use. But certainly in writing, I collect data on this, and even those people who get a band 7 in lexical resource and grammatical range and accuracy still have difficulties with task response. So again, it's that argumentation, what it means to make a clear argument and to support it. That's often the thing that people struggle with. I think people are generally okay with coherence and cohesion because, most people, they look up like, okay, how many paragraphs should I use? And they make sure that they use their like in conclusion or on the one hand, on the other hand. I think they generally signpost their essays quite well. But that task response, that argumentation, for me, yeah, that's probably the problem I see most common that keeps people at that 6.5.
Okay, and in terms of you mentioned the paragraphs. How is there a right amount of paragraphs? Like, how many paragraphs should somebody write for writing task 2?
So I'll wear two hats for this. I'll wear my examiner hat and I'll wear my teacher hat. Now, the examiner hat will say that IELTS examiners get absolutely no guidance on how many paragraphs there should be. There's no meeting. There's no special knowledge where like Mr. or Mrs. IELTS, who's sitting up the top, King and Queen IELTS, say there has to be this number of paragraphs. There can't be this number of paragraphs. You can write 4, you can write 5, you can write 6, you can write 7. There is no information given from above that says what the correct number of paragraphs is. As a teacher, I always want to make things as simple as possible for my students. And so the advice I would give to a teacher is 4 paragraphs. Exception is, do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? For me, you can write 6 paragraphs for this, and you can even go up to like 320, 330 words. It's the only exception. It's the only one where I think maybe you could write a little bit more and write a few more paragraphs. I have also seen some really complex questions where I thought yeah, I don't see a four paragraph structure, but 90%, 95% of the essay questions can fit very neatly into a four paragraph structure. So teacher Glyn will say, try to get it into four paragraphs. Examiner Glyn will say, as long as the paragraphing is logical and appropriate, it's okay.
Okay. And in terms of, the structure, as an example, so four paragraphs, just say the introductions, two sentences as an example, the conclusion, one or two sentences, whatever it is. Can you use that same structure for all writing task two questions?
Um, Kind of. I mean, so the thing that all essays will have in common, or all appropriate essays will have in common, they'll have an introduction. And in the introduction, we basically want to inform the reader what we're going to be doing in the essay, what we're going to be discussing, what we're going to be exploring. In the conclusion, you want to summarize your ideas and maybe add like a final thought. And we're going to have the meat or the tofu or the mushroom burger patty in the middle. That's going to be the body paragraph, right? So it's going to be like introduction short, the main part is the body, conclusion is the end. But there are some differences in the introduction, for example, right? Some essay questions require you to take a position. For example, to what extent do you agree, or do you agree? Some essays don't require you to take a position. What are the advantages and disadvantages? So if you have an essay question that requires you to take a position, my recommendation, and again, there's nothing from above, my teacher recommendation is mention your position, mention your opinion in the introduction and in the conclusion. But if it's an advantages and disadvantages essay, don't do it. So you have to really understand, going back to the first point you made about like or the first one of the first questions, what would I do if I was just starting out with IELTS? I would familiarize myself with the question types and what's required, because that will, the introductions, they're more or less the same, but they can be, slightly different. And the same thing with the body paragraphs, some of them, they fit nicely into a template, like on the one hand, on the other hand, and then some of them don't. If it's do you agree and you say yes, you might go with firstly, secondly for your like signposting language. So there are lots of things that are in common with these essays, but if you're looking for one simple template for all essay questions, and if you're a C1 user of English, don't be smarter about it.
Right. Okay. Okay. And talking about, the advantages and disadvantages question, if the question asks us, for example, what are the advantages and disadvantages of studying abroad? Can we just focus on one? So, for example, can we just focus on the advantages and just leave the disadvantages? Or do we have to talk about both?
So I'm going to read out Band 5 task response. The main parts of the prompt are incompletely addressed. That's Band 5. And that is what we call a hard cap, right? So if you have advantages, disadvantages, and you only talk about advantages but not the disadvantages, that is the main parts of the prompt are incompletely addressed. And even if your argumentation is perfect, you cannot get more than a 5 for task response. Now, if you have, let's say you have like 2 paragraphs on the advantages and 1 paragraph on the disadvantages, I'm going to read the band descriptor for band 6. The main parts of the prompt are addressed, though some may be more fully covered than others. So if you have something, talk about X and Y, you should spend equal amount of time on X and Y. The
Okay.
tricky thing, and I'll just add something, sorry, the tricky thing, there are a couple of questions, right? What are the advantages and disadvantages? That's one type, and you have to talk about advantages and disadvantages. But then there's also, do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, which is a slightly different question. And you might think that this one, you could just talk about advantages or disadvantages. Again, there's nothing that comes down from above that says, how examiners should treat this. But the majority of experts out there, including Cambridge, including Oxford, including IDP, including British Council, those guys say with the do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, that this is a balanced essay, and so you should cover both points there.
Okay. And is that the same with the agree or disagree type of question? As in, do I have to talk about them equally, or can I just focus on the agree more than the disagree?
So, do you agree or disagree? You can pick one side. This is what we call a one-sided essay. You can turn that into a balanced essay. You can take the middle position. Again, for me as a teacher, I advise my students not to take too many risks with do you agree or disagree, or do you agree essays. Just pick one side. And, mentioning earlier, we have different types of essay. We have these discursive essays, which are balanced essays, but we also have one-sided essays. Do you agree or disagree? You can treat that as a one-sided essay. And so, you're welcome to take the position in this essay. I will explain why I agree with this idea, and then body paragraph 1, reason 1 why you agree, body paragraph 2, reason 2 why you agree, and you don't need to touch the other side of it at all.
Okay, interesting. So in that case, we can just leave out the disagree completely.
Yeah, so they should have an understanding of what are balanced essays and what are one-sided essays, and familiarizing yourself with those different essay types. This is why you can't just learn to write one type of essay and apply it. And the reason I think behind this is IELTS knows that the millions of people that take it are going to do everything they can to hack this essay. They're going to be content creators out there that say, do this to get a band 9. And if we have the same type of questions over and over and over again, people are going to get their hands on templates. They're going to cheat the exam. And this is why we start to see stranger questions in the speaking, and I think more difficult questions in the writing, is because they're trying to pull people off script. They're trying to test people's ability to use language, not their ability to memorize a template from this YouTuber or that YouTuber.
Interesting. Okay. One thing we haven't touched on much is the word count. I know you briefly spoke about that at the start. So for writing task 2, it says that the minimum word count is 250 words, or along those lines, as in don't write more. But what happens if you write fewer words than that?
So well done on fewer, not less. I make that mistake. I always make that mistake. I always say less words. I should say fewer. So well done. C2. Yeah. So in the past, there used to be a penalty, right? If you wrote fewer than 250 words, there was a penalty. Now that penalty's been removed officially. So there's not an automatic penalization. However, it's very unlikely that you can make and develop the points fully in 200 words, for example. So while there's not an official penalization, there's not an official punishment like there used to be in the past, common sense tells us that, if we're going to write an essay and we have to develop points, we're going to need some words to do that. And again, going back to not taking risks, if they say write at least 250 words, don't take the risk. Write at least 250 words. If you're on exam day, and you don't know how to write 250 words, the mistake that you've made is that you've taken the exam before you're ready to take it. Anyone with a bit of training can learn how to write a 250-word essay.
Okay, so he says, when you said that, write at least 250 words, if that is the minimum amount of words, then is there a maximum? For example, does that mean the more I write, the more marks I can get?
So I made a video on this not too long ago, looking at, because I always gave the point, I think we agreed on this before, right? 10% over, absolutely fine. So, 270 words, absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. 20% over, I think, is okay. But I always say to my students, like, okay, 300 words, cap it at 300 words. If you need to go 310, fine. If you want to write more, with my own students, I say, before you write the essay, tell me why you want to write more, and I'll give you the green light or not. So again, there's no official guidance from above. The only official guidance is there is no upper limit. So if you wanted to write 10,000 words, there's nothing in IELTS that says that you can't do this. Of course, you physically can't do it in 40 minutes, but okay. Now, we also got a lot of like anecdotal evidence from niners, right? Band 9 candidates who wrote their essay and they got band 9. And they came back and they said, I wrote 500 words and I got my band 9. And so a lot of people got the idea that, oh, I should write 500 words too. Now, as a teacher, as an examiner, you want to write 500 words? Fine. The examiner will hate you for it because examiners are paid per essay that you check. Yeah, they're not paid per time. They're paid per essay. And so it's like, okay, I have to work twice as long because you're writing these 500-word essays, but they shouldn't mark you down for it. But again, what does British Council say? British Council says don't write more than 300 words. IDP says the same. Don't write too many words. IELTS Liz says don't write more than 300, 310 words. Objective IELTS, a book published by, I think, Cambridge University Press, they say don't write more than 300 words. So the question candidates should ask themselves is, well, if British Council, IDP, IELTS Liz, and Cambridge University Press, and How to IELTS and Expert Examiner IELTS are saying, stick to about no more than 300, 310 words, why would you then want to write 400, 500? Now, again, candidates can come back and they do, and they will say, but can I? Okay, you advise me not to, but can I? Short answer is yes, you can. Is it going to get you more marks? I would say there's a 80% chance that you'll lose marks, not get more marks. Not because of the word count, but there's more that can go wrong, right? IELTS, the spirit of an IELTS essay is to write concisely, to write clearly, giving straightforward information and straightforward argumentation. You lose marks for going off topic. You lose marks for what we call lapses in coherence. You also lose marks for grammatical mistakes, for imprecise vocab. And obviously, if you're writing 500 words, the probability that you'll make mistakes increases. Now, if you're a band 9, if you took the test, Brick, you could write a 600-word essay and you'd get band 9. Does that mean that, B2 people or C1 people should do that? No. Just the same as my student Sergey, he can drink a 2-liter bottle of Coke and then run a marathon. Does that mean I should do it? Absolutely not.
Okay, a good analogy there. And in the writing task 2 essays, so the introduction and the conclusion, should we be giving our opinion in the introduction, or should we do it in the conclusion, or both?
So, if it's an essay that requires you to take a position, there is something I think in the band descriptors about maintaining a clear position. And so, as the teacher, again, the teacher that doesn't want to take any risks, the best idea for me is to state what your position is in the introduction. Don't go into details. So in this essay, I will discuss both sides and argue that on the whole, social media does more harm than good. And I've stated my position. Then I will discuss both sides. Then in the conclusion, I will kind of summarize my main arguments and then say, in my opinion, I take this side more than this side because da, 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 da. So I would develop my opinion in the conclusion, but I would state it in the introduction. And I do know one IELTS examiner, and I don't think she should have been doing this. I think it was a mistake, but she said explicitly to me that if she sees an opinion essay and the position isn't clearly stated in the introduction, she hard caps it either at a 5 or a 6. I'm not sure which one, a 5 or a 6. Now, I was very surprised at that because this IELTS examiner, she had a she had a channel on YouTube for a while. I don't think she's there, but she was like reasonably big. I won't mention her name. But when she told me that, I was a little bit surprised. So it is interesting how like some examiners take that position, even though there's not that guidance from above. But she, says, nope, need to maintain a clear position. So I would say if there's an opinion, if you have to take a position, don't take the risk. State the position in the introduction and develop the opinion in the conclusion.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for clarifying that. So now we are going to move on to part 2 of this podcast, where we will talk about writing task 2 scenarios. So here's the first scenario. I'm a complete beginner. Where should I start if I want to prepare for the IELTS writing test? Can you explain it step by step?
Oh, how long do we have? Okay, so where would I start? I would start by familiarizing myself with all of the different question types. Now, there is some overlap, right? It's like, a 2-part question and like causes and solutions and problems and solutions. Some of them, some people say there are 9 categories, some people say there are 5. Regardless, I would familiarize myself with the different types of essay questions. That's what I would do firstly. Then I would look at a bunch of model answers. Where would I find this? I know you have a lot of model answers yourself.
Yeah.
IELTS Liz, for me, is a great source. It's free. She's reliable. She's not trying to sell you anything. It's the OG of IELTS preparation. And she has a bunch of Band 9 model essays, all within about 300 or 310 words. So I would familiarize myself with that. Then I would just break it down into, how do I write an introduction? How do I write a body paragraph with a topic sentence, with a label, with an explanation, with evidence? I would think, what does it mean to give an example? What does it mean to provide evidence? And then I would think about, what do I put in my conclusion? What's the easiest way to summarize my ideas? And also, I would want to learn about a reflective comment. Again, there's nothing from above that says that you must use a reflective comment, but I love it when I think it wraps up essays nicely when there's something like, for these reasons, governments should think carefully about their next step when it comes to regulating, I don't know, food production, right? Like a call to action or a bit of advice or a reminder. I think that's a really nice stylistic touch. So yeah, learn how to summarize my ideas, familiarize yourself with the question types, look at a bunch of model essays, learn how to write an introduction, learn how to write body paragraphs, and learn how to write a conclusion.
Okay, so that just shows that you can pretty much prepare without a teacher. Then, would you agree with that?
You can. I always think it's useful to have feedback, right?
100%. Yeah, I completely agree.
The same way, I think, it's great that we have the internet. It's great that we have so many resources available. Think of it like a doctor. I had some pain in my chest recently, right? And I could go on the internet. I could ask Dr. Google, and I could diagnose myself with costochondritis, and I could understand, okay, there's probably some inflammation. I'll buy some curcuma, turmeric powder, and add that to my protein shakes, and maybe that will help. Okay, but I would feel a little bit insecure doing that. Or I could go to a doctor, she could run a bunch of tests and check and give me a diagnosis, which will cost a bit more money, but it will save me some time. And I think that's the benefit of the teachers, that if you have a critical error, you might have a blind spot. You might not be able to see something that, an expert can see.
Yeah, I completely agree with this. Like, although you can prepare for the IELTS writing or the IELTS in general on your own, I strongly advise students that if you can, you should invest in a teacher, because you'll just get to your your goal or your outcome a lot quicker you're most likely going to be a little bit more accurate. Just like in your example with the doctor, if you see a professional, if you see a doctor, you're more likely to get the right outcome as opposed to you just trying to investigate online. Okay, right. Here's another scenario. I ended up writing 370 words in task 2 because I had too much to say. But my friend said writing too much can actually lower your score. Is that true?
Writing writing a lot increases the chances, the probability that you'll make more mistakes, but you will not be punished automatically for writing too many words. We've been
Okay.
over this, I guess.
Yeah. But good summary there. Okay, so the third scenario, I think this is the third. Well, this is more of a question actually. Do I need to create a plan for my writing task 2 essay? If so, what should I include in my plan?
Okay, so I have a few videos on this actually where I write an essay. So the first thing that I do is I read the question. Then I read in short, yes, you should write a plan. I read the question, then I reread the question, and then I read the question for a third time, and then I read the question for a fourth time, and I underline all of the important bits because people just don't read the question. And the next thing that I do is brainstorm. I look at the main prompt. What are the advantages and disadvantages? Discuss both sides. To what extent do you agree? Right? I think about that and I brainstorm a list of ideas. Now, the important thing, this is an amazing skill to learn. Brainstorming means we're looking for quantity of ideas. We want to turn off that filter in our head that says, oh, no, that's stupid, or that's irrelevant, or that doesn't work. When we brainstorm, we want to get as many ideas, even if they are bad ideas, even if they are totally off topic. We brainstorm a list of ideas. Then, once we have that list of ideas, we select, if it's advantages and disadvantages, I will select 2 advantages and select 2 disadvantages, the ones that I think are easiest to write about. And the ones that are the most relevant to the task. Then I will write my plan. Write the introduction, or just a little bit. I'd put like I, and then B1, and then I'd say what I'm going to write about, and I take some short notes just to remind me of like. So if I give a concrete example, again, let's say governments should penalize people who don't recycle, agree or disagree, and let's say I agree, and I write down my first argument is climate change will destroy the world. Right? I'm not saying that's my position, but I could argue that. And then I write down, okay, what is climate change? Well, experts say this. And I just write a bunch of ideas next to it. And I would spend actually a significant amount of time not writing the essay. I would spend a minute or 90 seconds reading the question. I would spend about 5 minutes brainstorming. I'd spend about another 5 minutes planning. So I've already lost 12 minutes.
Yeah.
I would then spend about 22 minutes writing the essay, and the rest of the work I would spend editing. So when we say we have 40 minutes, that isn't necessarily 40 minutes to write the essay. I spend about half of the time, maybe just 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes actually writing. The rest is planning and editing. I don't know if you've ever had this situation, Brick, where you've seen an IELTS essay and you just decided to write it, and then halfway through you thought, oh my goodness, this isn't going anywhere. What have I done? Planning avoids all of that. Planning is where we test our ideas. So in short, absolutely learn how to plan. And again, this is something, you can do with friends or you can do with a teacher, but learning how to plan, learning how to brainstorm, learning how to select the most relevant ideas. For me, those are hugely beneficial things that will make this difficult challenge of writing an essay, it will make it a breeze. It'll make it lovely. It'll make it so easy.
Yeah. Even with that, I think just planning out your essay is so underrated. I think if somebody plans, the more time you spend on planning, I think the better and the easier your essay will be to write. And I think the planning part, that is a skill. Learning how to plan properly. So usually, when I guide my students, or even when I teach students face to face, because that's what I'm doing all day during the daytime. For those of you who don't know, I am a full-time teacher. Um, I spend a lot of time just focusing on the plan. And as time goes on and as students get more and more practice, just naturally, you will be able to do things a lot quicker. Then at that moment, you can start to time this up. Okay, I'll spend about 7 minutes on planning, or 10 minutes. But during the initial stages, you should spend a lot of time planning. Um, and that will definitely help you. But yeah, thank you for that. Now, here's a scenario. I get this asked, or I get asked this all the time. I'm sure you get asked this as well, or at least something similar.
Can I guess what it is?
Yes, yeah. Guess what it is.
I can't generate ideas for my essays.
That was one of the questions. It wasn't this one though. Actually, sorry, you're right. That was the most popular question I got. However, this one I was talking about, this one is not that. This is to do with our friend ChatGPT. So here's a scenario. I recently uploaded my essay to ChatGPT for feedback, and it gave me a really high score. How accurate is ChatGPT when it comes to marking writing exams?
Not accurate at all. I use ChatGPT every single day. I am a lover of ChatGPT. My life has been transformed. The lessons that I make have been transformed. My whole life has improved like 1,000% thanks to the invention of ChatGPT. However, it cannot. I even spent like 4 hours a couple of months ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, 4 hours trying to train ChatGPT on my own revised band descriptors. I changed IELTS band descriptors, I rewrote them, and I said, okay, keep in mind the time limit, keep in mind these are L2 users of English, keep in mind we shouldn't apply the same. I managed to change it so that I could finally get a band 9, because I couldn't get a band 9 through ChatGPT. Just couldn't do it. And then it was great. And I thought, I've done it. I'm going to make a video, and I'm going to say to the world, say this to ChatGPT and it will mark your IELTS tests perfectly. But then, Brick, I decided to take a B1's piece of writing, gave it to ChatGPT and said, now use the criteria I gave you and mark this person's writing. And they said C2. Oh, no. So no, it can't. It can give meaningful feedback. It can tell you about like things that are unclear. It can tell you about vocab that's imprecise, collocations, the black and white stuff, grammatical mistakes. It can be a huge help. It cannot tell you if your writing is C2, C1, B2, B1. At least not by just asking it. There must be a secret combination of words. There must be a way to train this. And I'm going to spend the next 12 months doing this, I hope. But at the moment, you can't ask it. You can't. It just won't give you reliable marks.
Yeah, I've been in almost the identical situation as yourself, where I tried to train ChatGPT, but I just got nowhere with it. In fact, I don't even think that ChatGPT is inaccurate when it comes to IELTS writing. I just think it's wrong. Like, for example, I remember a while ago, I wrote an essay out, and I know it was a band 9 essay. I uploaded it, and it gave me I think it was like a 7.25, which doesn't even exist. So I thought, oh, whatever. But like you, I've been trying my best to train it. I thought that by now we would have got there with ChatGPT, but we're not ready there yet. We're not there at all. So for those of you who do, write your essays and think you can save a bit of money by not going to a teacher and going to ChatGPT instead, I would strongly advise you not to go to ChatGPT to get your writing assessed. It's not accurate. Even with something simple as word count, if you ask it to, count your word count, it will probably get it wrong. I don't know if you tried that, but it's I
had I remember there was, you could write like a sentence, say count how many F's are in this sentence, and it just gets it wrong every time. There's a problem with programming. And
with other things, it's amazing, just like you said. But with this sort of stuff, I don't know why we're not there yet.
Yeah, for an extra bit of guidance, there is, I'm not connected to them at all, but there's a Facebook group called IELTS Writing Club. And I don't know if you know the guys at IELTS Kite, they're lovely people. Like one of the people from IELTS Kite, she just responds to every piece of writing on there. So every person who writes, of course, she doesn't give like crazy long feedback, but she does give feedback. And she was an IELTS examiner. So, go to IELTS Writing Club or something like that, or submit your writing to me or Brick, and you might get lucky. But yeah, ChatGPT, it's not going to give you reliable scores.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so stay away for that for get your writing assessed. Okay, right. Here's scenario 5. Okay. My teacher said that my conclusion should be very long. However, some people online say that it should be extremely short so I can focus more on the body paragraphs. How long should my conclusion paragraph be?
So, examiner hat, there is no correct answer to this. Teacher hat, well, even as an examiner, I would say your body paragraphs have to be longer than your conclusion and your. So think of it as something like, not exactly, but something like 15% introduction, 15% conclusion, right? And that leaves us with like 30%, 30%. Now, if you have 20/20 and then 30/30, my mathematics might be wrong, but in short, the introduction and the conclusion should be approximately the same length. The body paragraphs should be longer. Each body paragraph should be approximately the same length, but your body paragraph should be longer than your conclusion and your introduction. I have noticed a trend recently that people are writing extremely short conclusions. I don't like it. For me, it doesn't. I want you to wrap up the essay nicely. I like, in most essays, I like a summary of the main points and a reflective comment. People often leave out that reflective comment, and that's okay. I like that final reflective comment, which could be piece of advice, a reminder to people, or who is this important for. For me, that's a nice convention of ending an essay.
Okay, okay. Right. Here's the final scenario, and then I've taken questions from my WhatsApp group, my IELTS WhatsApp group. So the final scenario, I've taken the IELTS test 3 times, and each time I scored a band 6 in writing, and I don't know why. What should I do to attain a band 7?
So the reason this candidate got a band 6 3 times is because their English language level is B2. In order to get a band 7, your English language level needs to be C1. And getting from B2 to C1, the easiest way or the most natural way to do that is to work through a B2 course book. My favorite course books, I don't teach much with course books anymore, but my favorite course books are always Cutting Edge and English File. You can use it with self-study. I don't recommend it. You could use it with a bunch of friends. Again, don't really recommend it, but you can use it for self-study. If I was this candidate, I would collect 9 other people who are stuck at band 6. I would forget about IELTS. I would stop paying money. The money that you've spent on taking the IELTS test, I would give to a teacher. You can find, a reasonably good teacher for $20 an hour. You can find a teacher who maybe has a year experience for like $10 an hour, maybe in some places. Very often, it's great if you have a good teacher. It is great if you have a good teacher, but even if you have an average teacher, but you're super motivated, you'll get more out of it. A super motivated student with an average teacher will make more progress than a lazy student with the best teacher in the world. And so I would find 10 people, 9 other people, maybe find a teacher for $20 a class or $15 per class, have lessons twice a week in that group dynamic. Learn to enjoy the process of studying English, of getting your level higher, and then come back to IELTS. Come back to IELTS when you have better control over third conditionals, subjunctive, past modals, passive reporting structures, like the criminal is believed to have escaped through the window. once you have good control over those complex structures, you're more likely to get band 7. If you're looking for a quick fix, pay a teacher to do a mock, to do a writing check. Pay, either myself, yourself, or IELTS Kite, or one of the other numerous people who do these, so that they can give you the breakdown, not just the final band score, but they can tell you what you get for grammar, what you get for vocab, what you get for task response, what you get for coherence and cohesion, and also for them to tell you exactly why you get it and then address those weaknesses. So fast way, mock, writing check, and work specifically on those points. But if you've done it 3 times, chances are it's very probable that your language level is just not there. Make friends, learn to enjoy studying, have a nice warm atmosphere in your classes a couple of times a week, build your confidence, and come back to the IELTS when you're ready for it.
Okay, that's a really sound piece of advice. I would also like to add, for these students, and there are many students who are in this situation, and I know you've said this just earlier, have a look, in addition to what you said, have a look at model answers so you can see yourself what a band 7 answer looks like, and have a look at a bunch of band 7 answers, not just one, so you can see what's expected to get a band 7, and see if you can compare that to your own essay, and see what the differences are. But again, like you mentioned, get a teacher. That just speeds things up so much. Yeah. Right. That's the end of the scenarios. We're going to move on to the final section, where I've taken questions from my IELTS members from my private WhatsApp group. If you would like to join, you can click in the link in the description. Here's the first question.
Is this quick fire or is this long form?
We'll do quick fire. Quick fire. So I'm randomly going to pick questions. I've got a bunch of them. We won't ask all of them. I'll just pick out randomly. So we've got Rika from Indonesia. Forgive me if I pronounced your name wrong. How can I extend a paragraph when I'm stuck developing an essay to meet the minimum word count?
Learn how to write a label for your argument, an explanation of your argument, evidence or example for your argument.
Okay. And sorry, what do you mean by label? I know you mentioned it earlier.
So position, I agree that social media is a good thing. Label, social media helps us to keep in touch with our friends. Explanation, like if a person moves abroad, blah, 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 then they can keep in touch with their friends. So label is that topic sentence, that thing that answers the question. I agree with this because, or I disagree with this because, or this is a good idea because, that one simple statement which explains why you have the position that you have. Label, explanation, evidence or example. I think American schools teach this LEAT. It's called label, explanation, example or evidence, and T is tieback. I don't think you need tiebacks. Yeah, LEAT.
Okay, yeah. In our schools, we normally refer to the tieback as link. So you would link it back to the question. But yeah, so next question from Bitanim from Bangladesh. What can we do to improve idea generation?
Become more curious about the world, learn to enjoy the world, find out what people are talking about, have friends, have discussions about things, have a speaking club with 9 other people, or maybe have a smaller group with 4 or 5 of you that get together once a week, ideally people from different parts of the world. You're all practicing your English. You just look at an IELTS essay question and you discuss one a week.
Okay, well, that's really good advice. And that sounds quite fun as well. I like how you're adding, these scenarios where, study with your friends, study with other people. It makes it less stressful and
be proactive.
Quite fun as well.
Be proactive, enjoy it. Yeah, have nice little debates, nice little arguments, troll your friends, but enjoy it. Make it a fun process. Don't ask idiots on YouTube.
Yeah. Right. Another question from Amit. I think he did a mock test with you a while ago. He's from Bangladesh. He said, can we, I wrote it here, but I'm just going to reword it slightly. But he said, can we make up evidence in our supporting sentences? or does it have to be factual?
No, you can absolutely make it up. The problem is, and I advise against examiner versus teacher, the problem is when people make up research, the research sounds really, really, really suspicious and bogus, right? So I had an essay which is something like scientists discovered that 90% of people who eat McDonald's once a week die of heart disease within the first 12 months. And it's like, if you're making up
Yeah.
statistics to really, just to support your position, those statistics and the evidence and the research won't sound very academic, and that will lower your score for task response probably to a 6. So you have to be very, very careful. I don't think there's any need to invent research or to invent statistics, but absolutely you may do it. You're allowed to do it. There's nothing to stop you.
Okay. The next question from Amino from Mongolia. I think Mongolia and Bangladesh. The question is, how do I get a band 8?
Have borderline C1, C2 English language skills, also be familiar with the IELTS test and what's required, familiarize yourself with the band descriptors. But when we're talking about those highest of high levels, you really have to have borderline C1, C2 language to get a band 8.
Okay. Right, and we're just going to move on to an extra section. I know we said we're going to stop there, but I just wanted to ask some questions just about yourself and what your plans are. So I know you have a YouTube channel. I will link it below. But what are your future plans with your YouTube channel?
I like to keep things like relatively spontaneous. I always had the idea that for the first year of being a YouTuber, I wouldn't care about the quality of the content, right? I wouldn't worry so much about, do my thumbnails look beautiful? Do my videos look beautiful? First year was just, I'm that type of person where if I become too perfectionist about things, I'll just won't do it. So I have to start. I just have to do it. So the first year is just about making content and just showing people that, hey, I'm an examiner. I'm not perfect. I get things wrong. Examiners, you shouldn't be afraid of them. They are not gods. They are not even top level experts. They're just people with experience who know what C2, C1, B2, B1 looks like, right? So I think I hope I've made that impression and made people realize that examiners are normal people, nothing to be afraid of. Year 2 is about building an audience. Unfortunately, YouTube is just like Google, where Google and YouTube used to be, if you want to find something, you search for it and it will show you. Now whatever you search for will show you videos that have been paid for. So the next step is about, building that audience. It is a bit more difficult. I might have to put a bit of money into it. I've already paid for one video to be promoted. As I mentioned, I'm fully transparent about everything that I do. But yeah, content that looks a little bit nicer. I won't use clickbait. Maybe content that looks a little bit nicer. Maybe I'll branch out and do some stuff on listening and reading. I always like to do engagement with candidates, not just speaking test writing checks, but I'd like to do things like debates or lessons or guided writing with students. So there are a ton of different things. But like I say, I try to be flexible, I try to be spontaneous. When I have a good idea to do something, I'll do it. More of the same, and hopefully a bigger audience and maybe a bit more diverse content.
Yeah. One thing I really like about your channel is the fact that how quickly you put out content. And I've seen in many videos of yours. I don't know if you're still doing this, but where you had a writing club almost. I don't know if that's the right word, but where you and I think it was a writing club or speaking club where you had a group session where people could join, and it was a live session. I think it was live. Are you still doing those?
I stopped doing them because I asked people not to join from a telephone, and people kept joining from a telephone. You might know, Brick, that when you offer things for free, people are not always the most serious, and people, they're not always the most polite. And there were so many different levels of the different people and so many audio internet connections. At some point, I would really, really, really like to run some free lessons, but I think I have to choose the candidates more carefully. I have to make sure that they have a computer, make sure that their audio and their internet works. So I would like to do more of that. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, like this, unfortunately, this is the problem, and it makes it like other people have to suffer because of it. Where like where people think it's free, then they take advantage. Not that, yeah, our internet connection's good. Yeah, we got a good camera, but when you do a session with them, it's not good. You can't record. You just have to remove them. It wastes time. That means other people can't take that slot. And from my experience, the people who do pay privately for private sessions, they are more serious students. So even from a student's perspective, don't always try to take the free route. Try to invest in yourself, invest in your future. You will naturally be a bit more serious. If you think about it, if you put money towards something, you would want to make that money worthwhile. Whereas if it's free, if you come a bit late, no, yeah, whatever, So and take advantage of like of people like yourself by paying the fact, when I say take advantage, I mean take, you have access to an English teacher, an examiner. Take advantage of that by utilizing your time well, not making a joke out of it. But yeah, so with your YouTube channel, so if I were to ask you by the end of this year, where would you like to be in terms of subscribers?
By December, I minimum 10,000, optimistically 15,000. I think with organic growth, without paying for anything, I should be at 10,000 by the end. If I have a budget of, even if I just pay something like $30 per month, then I could probably push to 15, 20,000. But I'm new to YouTube, and I'm not very, some people are really, really good marketers. You look at IELTS Advantage, amazing marketers,
Yeah.
but in my opinion, not very interesting or revolutionary content, but beautiful marketing, beautiful production value. I kind of see myself as the opposite. So I'm not a great marketer, but I do it for fun. I've helped a lot of people along the way, and I've met, as much as I sometimes complain about non-serious candidates, it's been a real pleasure to speak to some of the candidates that I've had. I'm sure it's the same for you, where you get to meet these people.
Yeah.
Some people are really appreciative and grateful. So I want to keep that. I will always keep some free element to the work that I do on YouTube.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe 15,000 by the end of the year would be nice.
Okay. Well, I think you're on track. And do you have any other social media platforms where people can find you?
I have set up a Facebook group. It's not very active, but the Facebook group is the place to go if you really want to get a speaking test. Because if I'm on Telegram and I say, "Hey, do you want a speaking test?" about 100 people immediately respond. On Facebook, there's about 20. So, if you really want that speaking test, join the Facebook group. And I set up the Facebook group because a number of people from Bangladesh told me, like, "Oh, we don't have Telegram in our country. What can I do?" And I felt a little bit bad thinking, if I'm just on Telegram, that's not fair to everybody. So I'm on Facebook now as well. I choose Telegram for candidates like twice a week and Facebook once a week. So yeah, I'm on Facebook and Telegram now.
Okay. And are you planning on like releasing any like a course or like a platform where people like a paid product at all?
So I do have a website, expertexaminer.com, and there you'll just find a price list if you want to book a speaking test, right? So if somebody wants to book a speaking test or a writing check, they can see the price list there. It is expensive, but it's still less than what I would usually get. So if I want to take on this extra work, then I have to be paid what I want to be paid. But people, certainly I wouldn't, if people don't have money, don't pay for it. Course, I don't see the point in making courses. There's Objective IELTS. I think Objective IELTS is a wonderful IELTS course book. And instead of paying like $200 for an online English course, I would say buy the Objective IELTS book for $20, or maybe you'll find it online somewhere, who knows, and use that $200 with the other 7 people with their $200 and use that money and pay for a teacher. Paying for a teacher and using a course book produced by Cambridge University Press, for me, is better than paying $200 for an online course. I don't know if you've seen the online courses that many people produce. I'm not very impressed by the ones that I've seen.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen a couple out there. And I would say you can find videos on YouTube that are just of similar sort of nature. Yeah. Any final words? Any final remarks, Glyn?
Yeah, one final thing I'd say is don't be afraid of examiners. They're nothing special. One thing that I think people often overlook about IELTS is that if you're naturally speaking with your friends a band 8, on test day, you're probably going to be a band 7. Why? Because you're super nervous. Why? Because you're afraid of the examiner. Maybe the examiner's wearing a suit and the examiner's a foreigner and you've never spoken with a foreigner before. I have to say, some of the stupidest people I've ever met are IELTS examiners, right? I'm not mentioning any names. Some of the smartest people I know are also IELTS examiners, right? I know super smart IELTS examiners, and I know IELTS examiners where I think, like, I wouldn't even give you a job teaching, like, 7-year-old kids nursery rhymes. So there's nothing to be afraid of with IELTS examiners. Try to relax, try to enjoy it. But like any test, whether it's a driving test or a university exam, you're gonna feel nervous. I can say don't be afraid of examiners, but people will be afraid of examiners. Maybe learn to speak. We're back to speaking. Learn to speak under stress. Speak to strangers. See how you feel speaking to strangers when your heart starts racing when you're speaking to them. I think that's a skill that a lot of people overlook.
Right, okay. I think we'll stop there. If you have reached this point of the video, by the way, thank you very much. I will link our speaking podcast straight after this so you can watch that. But yeah, thank you very much, Glyn. And now we'll stop there recording there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brick. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.